Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for waiting. We've just concluded an Arria side event on accountability in Ukraine, hosted by Albania and France, and with really excellent attendance. A variety of points were made. Of course, many of you would have had access to what was said in the ECOSOC room next door, but the principle that I wanted to also emphasize is this is not really a time for talking, it's a time for action. International law cannot be a passive spectator. It can't be sedentary. It needs to move with alacrity to protect and to insist on accountability. The day after I commenced the investigation on the 2nd of March, I deployed a team to the region. I've been myself to Ukraine twice in this last period, to Lviv and to Kiev. I've been to Busha and to Borodenko, and my team of analysts and forensic experts, anthropologists and lawyers have been to other areas as well, and at the same time as conducting their own independent outreach and investigations, they've been also working and building relationships with the Ukrainian authorities. Ukraine has an excellent Prosecutor General. There's great work done at the regional level by Europol, and particularly Eurojust. We signed a joint investigation team agreement the day before yesterday, in which for the first time in the history of the ICC, the Office of the Prosecutor is a participant in that joint investigation team with Poland, with Lithuania, and with Ukraine. And in parallel to that, there are more than 9 other European states that are conducting structural and other investigations. The truth does not need to be a phantom that cannot be grasped. It's grasped by rolling up one's sleeves, by working, by conducting old-fashioned investigative efforts, by using modern technology, harnessing technology, whether it's satellite or radar or interception, and combining it to see what seems to be true. And ultimately, the great safeguard of international justice is not down to a particular witness, it's not down to a particular prosecuting national authority, it's not down to me. There are judges above us, independent judges that will evaluate and weigh the evidence and ultimately make determinations. So I think the message at the moment really must be a reinvigoration of the law, an acceleration of effort to make the law solid, to make the law real, and not an abstract principle that is for lawyers in their robes in courtrooms in the distant Hague, or even in courtrooms in Ukraine or in Poland or anywhere else for that matter. It really needs to be seen, and it needs to have an effect to try to mitigate the worst excesses of human behavior that are manifested in crimes within the court's jurisdiction. We should feel ashamed. We should feel ashamed that in 2022 we continue in so many parts of the world to see violence that may constitute genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. And the pictures at this particular moment, the focus is on Ukraine, but in many other parts of the world, we need to do better. And we need to realize there is hope. There are examples out there, but we need all individuals, the media, the great journalism, in fact, that we've seen by different media houses, the great courage going into different locations, very good NGOs, national authorities. Nobody should be a bystander, because if we don't stand up for justice now, who will stand up for justice for any of us?
Prosecutor, thank you. Mr. Prosecutor, it's Pamela Falk from CBS News. Have you identified any command responsibility focuses? In other words, is Putin a subject of interest in any of the war crimes that you've seen so far? And how is the United States, even though they're not signatories of the Rome Statute, how are they contributing? They said they're sending information. Are they doing that to your office? Thank you.
Yes. No, it's an interesting question and a good question, but we follow the evidence. We don't, we're not so self-indulgent or inappropriate to decide with the targets and then try to get evidence, scratch and grub around for evidence that fits pre-identified targets, that action would not be becoming of a local prosecutor in a local magistrate's court, and it's certainly not appropriate at the international level. We follow the evidence, and we are, nobody has a free pass on any side, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's the Russian Federation, whether it's formal forces or whether it's irregular forces. The law is clear. There are clear parameters. Nobody can say in 2022, with the internet, with Twitter, with movies, that nobody knows what these laws are. Everybody knows what these laws are. The question is, do people think that international criminal law is an a la carte menu, that you can take what you want and ignore what you don't? And I think collectively, all states are not perfect. None of us are. There's been a degree of duality. There's been a degree of selectivity. But I think now we're at a very acute moment in which we need to realize whatever the momentary discomfort of complying with the law at a state level, it is far better and it is far less painful than the alternative, which is a wild west of unpredictability that could lead to even more catastrophe on a global scale.
And the US?
James Bays.
On the US, I've said since before my election, I will reach out and engage with state parties and with non-state parties. You've seen today the excellent Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice, Ambassador Beth Van Schaak, has made her remarks, and I think they speak much more eloquently than I could possibly try to replicate.
James Bays from Al Jazeera. You said in the meeting that you've made 3 attempts to try and contact Russia. You also heard from the Russian representative in that meeting who said the ICC is merely a political instrument and has nothing in common with justice. Having heard those words, what are your reaction to that, and what will it mean for your investigation if you get no cooperation from Russia?
You know, it's not unknown in local prosecutions that there may be non-cooperation from different individuals that one wishes to speak to. That doesn't mean that one retires or that one goes to bed and pulls the covers over one's face. It means that one looks at other approaches. I've said very clearly I don't have an agenda. I'm not in favor of Russia or against Russia, nor am I in favor of Ukraine or against Ukraine. This is an issue of politics. What we are in favor of, and it wasn't a soundbite, is that we are in favor of the law, which is in favor of humanity, which is to protect humanity. And so we will do our job. There's always different ways to try to get to the truth, and as long as we have the stamina, the strategic focus and the plan in place, there are always different options to try to get to the truth, and we've seen it. It's not a hot air. You've heard already today examples that you all know very well, whether it's Sierra Leone and Charles Taylor, or whether it's ICTY cases from low level to the highest level. The basic principle is not new. It's based upon even in antiquity, but in more recent times, or at least in 1215, the Magna Carta and the well-known adage that the king is under no man but God and the law. This applies with equal force today, that the law is above us, and if the law is not above us, there's nothing below us except the abyss.
Prosecutor Michelle Nichols from Reuters. We've heard a lot of growing concerns here about sexual violence in Ukraine, even an accusation that rape may be being used as a weapon of war. What evidence has your office found so far of sexual violence in Ukraine?
I'm not going to discuss the nature of evidence because we hear reports. We'll take evidence, and every piece of evidence has to be evaluated. But I said very early on, I think in my first interview, in fact, and based upon experience, that whilst we were focusing at that stage, or even the newspaper reports and the TV reports were focusing on shelling, on targeting, it was not surprising that as urban warfare intensified, I said I feared that there would be increasing allegations and reports of sexual gender-based violence, and also increasing reports regarding how children may be targeted or certainly affected by conflict. And we need to continue our discipline and our focus. So the way we approach evidence and the detachment and the objectivity with which we collect it and consider it can be capable of being assessed, and if necessary presented to judges without it being polluted with any consideration that we've jumped the gun and we haven't followed normal processes. But it's a very important area. It's an area that I have said repeatedly from before the 24th of February. I will prioritize sexual and gender-based crimes, and crimes against children are traditionally underreported, under-investigated, and undercharged, and particularly, even more so I think than anything else, children very often are invisible, and we need to bring them into the light in terms of how they are affected by conflict, and particularly by any allegations that may constitute statutes within the crimes within the jurisdiction of the court.
Mr. Khan.
No, sorry, this lady first, then you. But your voice is very loud.
Thank you very much, Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. 2 questions. First, how do you feel, having been through this whole meeting, about the issue of trying to get all of the disparate groups that are doing investigations together so that you're not duplicating efforts, and on trying to get some kind of an arrangement for accountability rather than having 15 different efforts? And then I'll ask you my second question.
No, then I will give it to the other lady. Yes, so good try though. So in relation to the, and we can come back if there's time. In relation to the first question, I mean, I've said in different fora, more does not mean better. I think there's clear distinction between the International Court of Justice, which is a principal organ, of course, of the United Nations, has a well-known and vital role for state responsibility, the European Court of Human Rights, of course the ICC, and then the Rome Statute is built upon complementarity. So it's the obligation, not just the right, the obligation, the responsibility of states to step up and go forward. Now, in addition to that, into the mix, there's many other initiatives that are there, and I think coordination is vital. And what I've said in different fora, that we have seen in terms of humanitarian assistance and the need for OCHA, and I think in areas that are within the jurisdiction of the court, we should be willing to partner and work and also coordinate in a way that OCHA endeavors to do for humanitarian assistance. I think we've had excellent relationships so far with the President, Ladislav Hamran of Eurojust. We need to be non-territorial. It's not about building fiefdoms or empires. It's about making sure that every action is as effective as possible because the world is watching, but also we have responsibilities in a very serious matter that we have to, move forward with. So I think that's how we will work, hopefully, ever more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. You mentioned the collection and consideration of evidence. Could I ask you, what role will technology play in your collection of evidence, and what sorts of things will you consider in terms of evidence, like from satellite photos to text messages to social media posts to this e-enemy chatbot? There's various things out there. What do you consider to reach the international standard, I suppose, for evidence?
Yeah, I'll deal with the first part of that question first. I think it's a fabulous question. It's actually very close to my heart. Even before my election and throughout, I've been repeatedly saying that to deal with the mass data sets that are one of the distinguishing characteristics of acts and indeed crimes that may come within the jurisdiction of the court, social media, internet, photographs, video, not just testimonial evidence. We need to harness technology ever better, and we did that quite effectively in my last mandate as the Special Advisor and Head of the UN team investigating ISIS. We've had some indications of support for that, and we're going to improve the capacity of the court, and it's about partnerships. Technology is not a substitute to old-fashioned methods, but proper, effective investigations cannot take place without proper technology. There needs to be a way to ingest this variety of material, testimonial, video, audio, forensics. There needs to be ways to map out the different types of evidence, to look at the metadata, which is vital. I mean, you can imagine a witness very often traumatized. With the passage of time, their memories naturally may change, may falter, and judges, of course, must ultimately assess the credibility of a particular witness. The same applies to forensic evidence, but the advantage is if forensic evidence is collected properly, the metadata can be scrubbed off and collected in a way that doesn't alter, and then it's more capable, to be viewed as reliable once it's been tested and it's been looked into. So it's absolutely, essential. There was an area I think I didn't answer. What was that part?
This e-enemy chatbot, would you include that in it as well?
I think all kinds of technology, and I remember my point now. It's not simply doing it with states. I've said that nobody can be a spectator, and I must really single out and commend Microsoft and its president Brad Smith, because we worked very closely with them in UNITAD, my last mandate. And on my first trip to Ukraine, when I came back, they were at the airport at Schiphol. I had further meetings, and they've also pledged to partner with us so that cognitive services, the machine learning tools, the artificial intelligence, the face identification, the translation tools that allow you to really identify what should be looked at more closely. All of that can be done far more effectively with technology. And then, of course, the experts in the team can look into it, dive into it more closely and see what it shows. So I think this is, if any team does not embrace that fully, we're missing a massive opportunity. And hopefully, we're going to have that ready very soon.
Prosecutor Chris Reyes with CBC News. With an investigation this thorough and this complex, is there any kind of timetable that you could give in terms of how this will play out?
Well, we need to move quickly. I mean, quite frankly, international criminal justice I can't afford to be pedestrian. In the Georgia situation, let me be quite, it was an investigation that commenced because of events in 2008. And there was a preliminary examination, there was an investigation. I did an evidence review in November 2021. I applied for warrants in March 2022. The judges will determine it. But we can't work in a way that by the time warrants are issued or that the prosecutor seeks a warrant, nobody remembers what happened originally. So I think the model also needs to change for international justice. I've said repeatedly, this is an opportunity to redefine success. I said this before Ukraine, it's nothing specific to Ukraine. But we need to not view ourselves as a top of a pyramid, an apex, but really more of a hub in which we are a court of last resort. The judge is there to determine matters, but we can also feed in information, going back to technology, to the spokes of national prosecutions. We can receive as well, collect as much information from states, but also our independent investigations, verify, look at the undercurrents, look whether evidence has been fabricated or altered, and then feed it to national authorities, because every state has certain international law responsibilities, and certainly every state has national legal responsibilities. So those that have jurisdiction need to be supported. So I think really that's the model. And the other one is, I think, the court, the previous model. I've inherited a number of cases, but I think generally we need to try over a period. It won't happen straight away, but we need to focus on maybe fewer cases over the next period and go deeper. Instead of trying to do 3 or 4 cases, or 5 cases, or 6 cases from a situation, go deeper, because then you have an impact, and also the knowledge you've gathered, the skills that have been brought into a particular situation, language and politics and undercurrents and culture, or military organization, they can be more effectively deployed by going more deep. And then hopefully we can see that this idea of international justice isn't some kind of kumbaya principle. It's not about campfires and feeling good or trying to, say a few words in the face of a gale that is silencing our words before they get out of our mouths. we can show that international law can be effective and nimble and meaningful. And this is why I said earlier, it is one of these anchors that maybe we've disregarded. Before Ukraine, many countries have disregarded it. This is part of the contradictions and paradoxes of relationships. We have to stick with the law. This is one of the lessons, I think, as humanity, and definitely as the United Nations, we need to heed. Stick to the law even when it causes discomfort, even when you feel you couldn't get away with it, or you could ignore it, or close one's eyes to it. Because what we see is that if you don't hold yourselves to these principles, others with ever greater boldness tear up these principles. And I think this moment we see it coming together. The fact that 42 countries have referred the matter to the court does not show to me the impotence of international law. It shows a vivid realization that we need the law more than ever, and now the challenge is not to talk about it, but to implement it. Anybody else? Okay, just one last question, I promised to.
You yourself have been to Ukraine, you've been to Bucha and some other places. What was your reaction when you saw, for instance, the destruction and devastation in Bucha, and are you planning to go back to Ukraine again?
Yes, God willing, of course. It's, I think I've said repeatedly, one can't be effective as a lawyer or as an investigator without knowing the country and learning about it. One can't be a legal commando. You need to actually spend time in the country, and this is what we're trying to do with the team. In terms of feelings, I won't get into that, but I've been to many parts of the world, in Asia, in Northeast and West Africa, in Europe, in the Balkans, in Rwanda, and of course in Ukraine and many other parts as well. And domestically, whenever one sees, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's rape, or whether it's on a massive scale, of course, one has to be objective, whether you're a forensic officer, a crime scene officer, you know, somebody in an ambulance, or a member of the fire service, or an international lawyer. But at the same time, one needs to remain detached and be forensic about matters, to always have a critical thought in one's mind, because that's how you build strong cases, not by simply accepting anything at face value. You need to get to the bottom of everything. And when we do that, I have every confidence that independent judges also will do the same, and people should, you know, the truth will emerge. And I think we will go faster than before, and this is one of the opportunities to see how fast can we go as we are building additional capacity at the same time. Thank you so much.